Welcome, Mat Irvine.
Thank you, Sean.
Obviously, if you're watching this, you probably know who Matt is already. So this guy's amazing. He's had a decades-long career in visual effects. Sorry. So there's Doctor Who, Blake Seven, Robot Wars. The list goes on and on and on. I remember you being on TV as well quite a bit, just popping up on Blue Peter and things like that, just demonstrating models and.
I'll have to correct you there. No, I never did Blue Peter.
Oh, was it not Blue Peter?
It's a common urban myth. Hey, Matt Irvine, have you done Blue Peter? Nope. I did Multicolored Swap Shop and Saturday Superstore.
Oh,
And then the
okay.
one after it, nobody can remember the name of, going live. Was it whatever? I don't know. Somebody will correct me. No, I never did Blue Peter. I did operate the dog behind the scenes. Dog equals K9 once, but that's my only connection with Blue Peter. Never was on the screen. Technically, the dog should have got a Blue Peter badge, but he never did actually. Anyway,
So how did it all begin? Because you started off in the sales department at the BBC, didn't you?
well, it's almost by chance, really.
Mm.
Although looking back, I found my end of term report from my headmaster at my grammar school. Good heavens, I went to grammar school. Um, Said would like to join the BBC. I don't ever recall saying that, but it's written down. So no, I did actually. I joined the BBC. I lived in North London, and at
Yeah.
the time, the BBC still occupied Alexandra Palace, or AP in BBC jargon. Ali Pali, as everybody else called it, still does. It was there with news. Everything else had moved out long, 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 but news had stayed there.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
didn't live that far away. And I heard a friend of a friend who also temporarily worked there. Oh, they do holiday relief jobs. You know, you basically people go on holiday, people come in and replace them while they're away. And oh, that's all right. And I went along, and he worked, I think, in the film library there. And in fact, there was a job in the stills, the photographic library. You know, it's basically, have you got a camera? Yes. Well, you're in. It was a little bit more than that, but I mean, actually, it was actually because I did ask things like because it was like who was the. I do remember one, which was who was the vice president of America at that particular time. I did actually happen to know that one, and so I got in there and I went in as a holiday relief job, but basically stayed for about a year and a half, and then internally moved. They always said it's very difficult to move inside. It was easier to leave, reach, go and join again. But no, actual fact, there were jobs that were advertised, internal jobs that were advertised in the BBC staff magazine Ariel. So I mean, we're talking way, way, way before electronic communications.
Mm.
And so there, and I found out about jobs about the visual effects department that did exist, because news was always separate from it. And went along and saw Jack Kine, one of the creators of the department with Bernard Wilkie, and he put me on a 2 week attachment, and 25 years later I left.
So I mean, it's everyone's dream's job to work in this sort of that sort of field. Round about that time as well, because practical effects just sounded really amazing to create. You didn't have a lot of space to work in originally, did you?
Um, yes, we didn't have a lot of space. When I first joined, news had actually moved to Television Centre.
Yeah.
And moved to what we called stage six, which, if you look at the front of the building, the round bit, it was the bit on the right hand side that was built, the last thing to actually to be built. And news were in there. So we were part of the television centre conglomerate, but we actually were still separate.
Yeah.
And I remember actually walking out of the news bit, along the corridor into the rotunda, i.e. the bit you see, the bit that people know as television centre, round, and then went into the scenery block, which was the bit at the back and no longer exists. And
Hmm.
that was the first bit of actually television centre being built. And to see Jack, and the offices and workshops were in actually office space. The whole block was the design block where the sets were designed, the set designers worked there, the graphics designers worked there, costume makeup areas there. and effects have basically taken over a, an area that would have been offices, would have had tables and chairs, and I was going to say computers, but it was pre-computer, typewriters, the telephones, and sort of knocked it out. So it was an area, difficult to say actually. I can't remember exactly how big it was, could work it out. It was probably no more, and I'm going to Imperial here, it'd be no more than about 14, 15 feet wide by about 30 feet long. So it wasn't that big. And
Hmm.
in that area were benches. I mean, it wasn't office space anymore. It was a workshop. We fortunately had at the end, at the other end from the way you normally came in, there were doors out of emergency exit, basically, went out to the roof
Yeah.
on top of the design block, and then through stairs it went out in the back into the television center itself. But it was very useful actually having the area outside because it got covered in paint because we went outside to spray things and paint things, and they always noted the fact is, you tell her what you were last doing, but what the color was. Must be painting a TARDIS. It's blue outside. No, it was something else. But so yeah, it was very, very limited space to work in.
So when you first joined that department, I mean, you must have been you must have needed to be sort of multi-skilled in so many different things like electronics, metalwork, woodwork.
Well, you would think so. I mean, Jack Kine's famous phrase, "We're Jack of all trades." Jack. Um, Master of none is the bit that goes on, which is more or less true. Now, when you went into the department, I mean, I went in working for news, time for Apollo. I cast your mind back, it was way before your time, but Apollo 12, Al Bean had a camera which was a Vidicon analog camera, and he managed to point it at the sun. Now, cameras don't generally like digital cameras don't like being pointed at the sun. The Vidicon tubed cameras certainly didn't, and it burnt it out. So we ended up that evening with all the audio, all the talk of the two astronauts, and but no pictures. So I'd actually gone home that night, got my Airfix lunar module kit out, literally, did a little setup. I had a small, I mean, a very small, I mean, I'm talking about this size,
Hmm.
photographic area, and mocked up a moon base with we knew it had landed near Surveyor 3, which had landed, unmanned probe, which had landed 3 years earlier. And that was in sitting in a little crater, and it was at the lunar module for Apollo 12 was on the edge of that crater, and I managed to mock it up. I had no pictures, of course, of it, but it actually fact, and this was purely coincidental. All right, I do know my space stuff, so I knew the layout of where the sort of things would go, but I
Yeah.
actually got it pretty correct. And everybody else was looked at me slightly suspiciously. What did you know? Well, no, I just know the technology behind it and where
Yeah.
logically it would be. So I actually got it pretty. So that night, I mean, we had about I think 14 or 15 pictures of mine on the record I ever had of on the news of pictures, and I had that folder. And I took it along to Jack, and Jack gave me this trial. He said we've started up a division to aid the Open University, which had just started. Ironically, that took over the area back at Alexandra Palace.
Okay.
So I moved back because I still lived relatively close to it. So actually, it shortened my journey into work for a little while. And I joined my designer there, Jerry Aberwath. Unfortunately, he died many years ago now. Very clever guy. Came from advertising. Taught me a lot. He taught me about perspective, strangely enough, and I still use it. I still think of Jerry whenever I'm drawing something. Put the correct perspective in.
Hmm.
Oh, Jerry taught me that. Strange. It's something I didn't because going back to the jack of all trades and sort of learning everything or other. Yes, you tended to be good or reasonable, let's say, at a number of things. My
Hmm.
my father was an electrical engineer, so he taught me about electricity, like don't unscrew the light switch, which you could in those days, and stick your fingers in, which I did once. I didn't do it again. Get 240 volts and sort of thing. But no, he taught me a lot about that, and he was also very practical, making things. I've still got a lot of these tools and these wood tools particularly.
Hmm.
I taught myself welding. a few things like that. Model making, obviously, I'd done since I was knee high to or whatever. So there was that side because I'd got the file from news of the Apollo stuff. So basically, you were sort of chucked in at the deep end, and you either sank or swam. And I probably swam a bit and managed. And in fact, when went up through the ranks and effects and became I became a senior designer. I actually ended up resigning and going back to be a designer, but I was actually selecting people to join the department in the heydays. So we're going back to late 70s, early 80s, probably, when we needed a big department. Still, nobody actually taught effects at colleges. They do now. They do
Mm.
elements of. We used to ask for a design qualification and such. But when it came down to looking at it, I mean, yes, we looked, had they got a design qualification? But I mean, we had people in that were highly qualified as far as, MAs and things. Well, they weren't any good at doing, because, and we had another guy, I remember particularly one guy he came in from the film industry. So obviously he knew, he said,
Mm.
I want people who can, I always used to say basically, here's a smoke gun, it's gone wrong, we're in the middle of the field and it's raining, get it working in time for the shoot. I mean, it's that thinking on your feet. If you can keep your
Yeah.
head when all about you are losing theirs, you obviously haven't appreciated the situation. But it was a bit like that. We wanted practical people. You could have as many degrees as you like. It didn't mean you could actually do the job. So, as I did, it wasn't called an apprenticeship, but it was in practice. I mean, I was a visual effects assistant. That was my term. We
Mm.
only had designers and assistants, or senior designers were introduced. So basically, you watched your peers. In my case, it was Bernard Wilkie, who, as I said, with Jack he created the department in '54, and Ian Scoons, very, very, very talented effects designer, again sadly died. Unfortunately, you hear me say, I'm afraid he's dead quite a lot in these sort of talks now because
Yeah.
we are going back a good number of years. Ian had come from Hammer Films and also then from Anderson and Thunderbirds and things like that. And I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot from Bernard, but I learnt a lot particularly from Ian. And you basically learnt on the job, um, explosives. I mean, we trained ourselves. No, who else is going to train us? I mean, there are courses now you can do,
Mm.
qualifications, but basically, who are we going to train us? No, we trained ourselves. And Bernard would come down to. We went down to a place down, oh, somewhere towards South, somewhere or other, and we would spend all afternoon wiring stuff up and learning how to do that. Interesting enough, actually, Bernard came back later on. He had retired by then, but he came back to supervise it. And I remember distinctly one time he said, "I'm a bit out of practice now. You show me how it's done." So I was a designer by then. Yeah, yes, I can sort of do that sort of. So I was teaching the teacher, as it were. But so yeah, we were self-taught in many many aspects.
What was it like health and safety wise back in the day? Because I'm sure that, like everything, I mean, it was across the board, wasn't it? It was a bit sort of a lot more lax than it was than it is today.
I would pull you up on saying it wasn't lax, but again, we had to basically look after ourselves on it. Health and
Uh,
safety was not in the same way as it is now. It did exist, obviously. And again, I just mentioned explosives, and obviously you had to be
yeah.
extremely careful. I remember later on, and I won't say what program or what, but later on, when I'd left the Beeb and I was working freelance and I went on a job, I wasn't doing explosives at all. And I saw a guy down on my left. I was looking after what I was looking after, and he was wiring up explosives. He had a proper firing box,
Hmm.
the key to switch it on and off. The key was in the box,
Right.
and I pulled him up afterwards. I said, his name, and he said, "Oh, my boss says always leave the key in case you lose it." Ah, no, it's there, so nobody can come along and boom, 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 boom. And health and safety was more in at that particular point. But it shows things do go. I mean, all right. I mean, fully admit there are times when it's not a case of taking risk. You do risk assessments.
Yeah.
You look at the situation. You say, and a risk assessment is very, very straightforward. It's basically saying, could something happen? And if it did happen, what would be the consequences? I mean, silly things like when I was directing, I had a few bits of directing, doing risk assessments for that. We're filming on a pavement.
Hmm.
All right, a bus could drive off and hit you. That is a risk. You can
Yeah.
lose control, boom, 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 in which case the result will be fairly catastrophic. But the risk is fairly low
Hmm.
of the bus driving off. I mean, yes, they do, but and the number of bus journeys that happen in the UK, how many times has happened? Very, very, very small. So if we're just filming on a pavement, whatever, find out you're aware of there's traffic, but the chances of a bus, or for that matter, any vehicle, driving off and hitting you is very strong. So although the potential is quite serious, the risk is
Hmm.
very, very low. So
Yeah.
therefore, you can film basically with impunity. I mean, hey, it's very unlikely that anything's going to drive off on hit you on the pavement. So every risk is every job you do. Now, right, effects are a bit more potentially risk problematic every time. I mean, we're blowing stuff up, we're collapsing ceilings, we're thumping somebody over the head with a hopefully a balsa wood chair, not a real one. You're jumping through a window which is hopefully pierced to resin um, glass, not real glass. So again, you do the risk. I mean, the PS2 itself, the resin glass can be quite sharp. You make sure your actor or person is welcome. I mean, I quote an exact example from Magnox, or as everybody now knows it, Edge of Darkness, very, very end, when Bob Peck is sitting in it's an enormous kitchen. It's in one of these uh, shooting lodges in Scotland,
Hmm.
and the SAS, etc., are about to burst in, and there was a big window at the back, and Bob's sitting there, probably with a whiskey or something or other, at the kitchen table, enormous great table, with his back to the window. The
Hmm.
window itself was glass. We took the whole window out, put in PS2 frames, balsa wood, taped in, blue tacked in, plasticine in, no nails. So we could then, I had woofers, these are big things that shoot air out rapidly. You fill
Hmm.
it up with dust and vermiculite, cork granules and things like that. So it's all soft. And you put it behind there and you blow it up. You put a couple of flash pots just for effect to give you the smoke and things. And then Bob is sitting directly behind, hey, he has his back to it. He's in a chair which has got a high back to it. He's
Hmm.
wearing a coat. Okay, Bob, turn your collar up, just to make sure. I knew it wasn't going to hit him, and
Hmm.
it's PS2. It affects glass anyway, and it's balsa wood. It's lightweight, so
Yeah.
everything here. And the interesting thing there, and this is just a slight aside, you can go so far on these things. But the director said, Michael said, "How far's the glass, the PS2 resin, gonna? Where's it going to end as far as Bob's concerned?" To be perfectly honest, you have no idea
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're sending blast through it. But as I said, Bob was protected. The chair back, in fact, he's wearing a coat. He's got the collar turned up, and his back is to it anyway.
Hmm.
So as Michael wanted, so I said it's going to be here, about 18 inches, half a meter from the chair. And I put my foot there, and I said, thinking to myself, I've absolutely got no idea what it is. Anyway, it all went through. Anyway, bang, flash, whatever. All the SAS extras, guns, guns will be fired, blanks, whatever, dubbed on sound and whatever. Mayhem ensues, and when it all cleared, I actually looked, and again, it's purely by chance. And I looked at where the last PS2 had ended. It was 18 inches from the chair, give or take an inch. I mean, so Michael's very impressed about that. I think not a lot impressed him, but I think that particular bit. But again, it is purely so the risk is okay. It could hit Bob, but if it does, it's not going to hurt him. It's not going to
Yeah.
injure him. But in fact, he didn't anyway. So that's how you have to balance up the business of doing risk assessments and health and safety with effects, and hopefully it still takes place. Unfortunately, things do happen and do go wrong, not only not only in the TV industry but in the film industry. It's all the same these days anyway.
But when you joined the department and you were an apprentice, you were learning, there's always like tricks of the trade that, the civilians don't know about. What was the most surprising thing that you found out about?
I think with the internet, the civilians do know everything these days. Um, it's a job really to actually single out one particular thing. Because the thing about the job was it was it drove you mad, but it was never boring in that it was always new. I always remember there's always instances. For 3 days, I made fake logs. I was an assistant at the time as a designer. You tell one of the assistants to make the fake logs, and they were made using asbestos substitute, obviously not asbestos, but a similar asbestolux, I think it's called something like that. And you used to break it up in water, and you managed to make logs out of chicken wire because you get your hands with the ends of it, you roll them all round, and you slathered on the gunk as it was by then because it's all mushy, and you put them aside to dry. And I think I made about 30 of them. And I'm thinking, why are we making fake logs? Well, if you're doing a fire sequence
Hmm.
and you're filming over a day, that fire would not change. In if you put real logs on there, they're going to burn. So you do one scene with the fire in the background, it's all blazing away, and you do a scene with real logs. Even half an hour, let alone an hour or half a day later, it's burnt away. And all right, you can put more, but you're never going to match exactly. Well, all you do in that case, use the fake logs, put
Hmm.
them up there on the fire, put a gas feed in,
Right.
and therefore you've always got, yes, the flames are going to vary, but hey, nobody's going to spot. Hopefully, nobody's going to spot that. But the actual overall log, the fire itself won't change, and that's why we made them. And obviously, at that particular point, I'm presuming we'd run. I mean, those fake logs, they last.
Yeah.
You're not burning the actual log, but and I we'd obviously run out, and Muggins had to make some. So it was things like that, and you never really thought about that.
Yeah.
How it would be done. Obviously, my background was modelling, and so therefore you actually, you look at anything TV or film, and you watch the models. You don't watch how the fire's burning. It's all
Yeah.
effects.
That's a good point. Yeah. So in the department, I'm sort of curious about the way that the bureaucracy works inside it. So let's say there's a TV show and they need something making, like could be a bazooka, it could be I don't know, could be anything. So they come up to the department. I mean, what's the process? Do they put in a slip or something like that? Do they just turn up and say, "Can you get me a gun?" Or what was it like?
I think in the very old days when the department started, yes, it possibly was like that. By the
Yeah,
time I joined, which really the second generation, us younger lot were coming in because I was only early 20s when I was the youngest. I was the youngest assistant and the youngest designer at the time. I've been beaten since. I think Mike Tucker certainly might beat me, certainly, but there are others as well. But so yeah, but you're working with the designers who were naturally older, and of course a lot of assistants were. Generally just wanted to be assistants. It's like a policeman. I'm not just going to be a constable. I'm going to be happy. I don't want to be a sergeant, an inspector, whatever. No, I'm quite happy staying as a constable.
yeah,
In the same way, a lot of the older assistants were much older than me, but were quite happy to remain being assistants. They didn't want the bother of being a designer.
yeah,
But by the time I'd got there, there was more. I mean, ideally, I guess because there's always going to be exceptions. Ideally, a script comes in to the office.
right,
The office managers or whatever, or the senior designers, as we came eventually, read through it and say, the production sent it because they presume there's going to be effects and there's an explosion, something sinks in a lake, somebody gets shot. Hey, it's Doctor Who, it's Blake Seven. Yes, of course it's going to have effects in it. Although they tried to do one Doctor Who without any effects once, but that's another story. Because we're expensive. That's the point. Um, and they go through it and it'd be marked up and say, yes, here's an effect. Then the manager would then go to the board, and it literally was a physical board on the wall with your names as designers at the top and then the assistants at the bottom. And there was literally tape and you taped it up, and the color, actually there were colors depending whether it was a drama, kids, documentary, whatever. So you
Hmm.
knew what it was sort of going to be. You didn't necessarily know any details, but you knew what type of program it was going to be. And then it was allocated to a designer. I cynically used to think, and in fact, there was an element of it that they used to work out who's best for it and give it to somebody else. There was an element of practicality in that Jack certainly would have said, in that we don't want the same people doing the same things all the time. They need to broaden their horizons. So,
Yeah,
but when the process became more and more specific, there was more of a logic in saying there's no point in getting somebody to build a model who's only sculpted something or other, or only done floor effects, the bangs and explosions and things like that. So
yeah,
nowadays, yes, you will get specialists within specialists, and probably specialists within that. Um, then it wasn't so much. So there was a sort of logic. And
yeah.
also, let's take Doctor Who. You know, people say, oh, you worked on Doctor Who all the time. No, Doctor Who was no way the biggest program we ever worked on at any one time. Be children's programs or something, or light entertainment as an overall strand. But obviously, Doctor Who, and then later Blake and Hitchhikers were big parts of this. Triffids, um, uh, Red Dwarf, all the science fiction types, so some of the kids' programs, Galloping Galaxies and Space Vets and things like that.
Hmm.
They were all more significant because you knew very well you're needed. Your effects techniques are going to be needed in it. So, and then once you've been allocated to the show, you then, and again, I'm talking theory, you're then handed the scripts, and probably the first thing you do is go for a meeting with the other heads of department, with the producer and director down at Television Centre. Because remember, at this time we were at Western Avenue, which was a mile and a half up the A40. That's where effects were the longest period of time. And you go for a meeting and you sit down with the set designer and the costume designer and the makeup designer, not normally the graphics designer, but sometimes. And their jobs were usually, set designer, the clues in the name, designing the sets, costume designer, ditto, makeup. But of course, if you're taking something like Doctor Who, or Blake for that matter, but particularly Doctor Who, the crossover is tremendous, particularly between costume and makeup.
Hmm.
So many costumes were made by costume, but they used, and I always quote one of my favorite. I have a love-hate relationship with Doctor Who creatures because a lot of them don't work. I got tied up with some of them in myself, but they are usually, an equity member stuffed inside a rubber suit. Now, but one of the ones that did work, and this was very early, I was only an assistant on it, was the Frontier in Space, John Pertwee times, were the Draconians, which I thought worked extremely well. But there, the masks were completely done by effects. John
Hmm.
Friedlander, who was in a department that didn't specialize, John Friedlander specialized. And he even made the material to make the costume for their actual skin costume. So basically, he would use the mask, and then makeup would fit it to the actor. And the skin that he'd made in sort of flat sheets of latex, and costume would make into the costumes. So that was a classic example of where effects was coordinated exactly, precisely alongside with makeup and costume. And then
Hmm.
maybe there's the same program. I don't know, well, certainly there will be model shots of the TARDIS, and we never seem to do stock shots. Every Doctor Who, the designer of that time would actually reshoot the TARDIS, little model of that, boom, boom, spinning, and then we'd have to think, does it spin clockwise or anti-clockwise? And we'd have to phone up the Doctor Appreciation Society and say, okay, which way? Because again, we were new to that particular one. I mean, not necessarily new to Who, but oh God, does the light flash when it's dematerialized? Oh, does it? We didn't those details. The Bible was not. Nowadays, it is. And
Hmm.
when Blake came along, it was different in that we did a whole season. With Who, you did a program, and the program, or rather, one story within a season, and the season was six. A
Yeah.
four-parter usually 5 4-parters, then a 6-parter, which was only a 4-parter with 2 extra episodes, which were far too long anyway, tagged on the end. But we didn't do, no way did you do a whole season. You do
Yeah.
one story, 4 episodes within it, and that's it. Then he went off and did Top of the Pops or Tomorrow's World or something else. With Blake, it was different in that it was done like, well, it was done like a drama, and then it was 13 episodes long, so you were on it throughout it. So
Yeah.
you can establish, oh, the Liberator's going left to right, the Liberator's going right. But well, we know that the light's on here, the light's not on there, the engine's not on then. But for Who, no, you didn't. You were always reshooting stuff that probably was already sitting in a roll of film somewhere in the film store at Brentford. But it, so I mean, Who is a classic example, I suppose, in combining all aspects of effects work. Very broadly, so it can effects work consisted of floor effects. They're the banks, explosions, the crashes, whatever, boom, and the weather
Yeah.
effects, rain, wind, snow, whatever. Special effects props, sonic screwdriver, the
Mm.
classic one, the TARDIS key, whatever. Those sort of the props that you couldn't normally go down to the proper company and hire. They were special props. And of course the model sequences, so which were really totally under effects control, particularly if you're on film.
Mm.
Occasionally you got forced into doing them in studios, which we didn't like doing because we were on uh, Vidicon cameras, old analog cameras, which were not the best to shoot models, whereas film still is, we reckon, although digital's catching up, but we still prefer shooting on film, filming on film, literally. So there, and of course, Who got the lot. I got the lot actually in Magnox in Edge of Darkness as well, because
Mm.
although okay, there were lots of elemental effects, rain particularly. I mean, it opens in a downpour in Yorkshire and it's raining. Surprise, surprise. We shot it in the middle of a drought. Would you believe? Yes, all the rain had to come out the Ilkley College duck pond using an effects fire engine. It's a real fire engine, but run by an effects company. In fact, they were a bit late turning up the first day. So it's all late. Somebody's fire in a garden. We felt being a fire engine. We ought to put it out. It's fine. It's fine. You're a fire engine first and foremost. But that had it had special props. I had to rig a Geiger counter out that would work on cue. We got a little bit of clock face of the hands of an old luminous watch, which you don't
Mm.
really get these days. And I made it so that you press the slider on it and it put it in front of the reader of the Geiger counter. And of course, the Geiger counter would register. And there were other effect bits and pieces as well. I mean, the supposedly uranium and plutonium rods and things like that. But also miniature work, because when it came down to it, they wanted the cooling ponds, where it was all set around the last episodes 5 and 6. And we went to see an area in North Wales,
Mm.
and we went to an actual lake, an underground lake, which opened to the public. So we went round, looked at it, and thought we could do it there. And we were already filming in the Manod slate mines where they stored all the art treasures from London during the war. In fact,
Mm.
the buildings they stored them were still there. And the asbestos roofs, so that had to be the first thing, move the asbestos roofs out. So in fact, the walls were left, I don't know actually, well, in fact, the water was dripping in all the time. So that's why they had the roofs on there, because the paintings were stored. But we weren't worried about that. I think we just put polythene over it instead. But they wanted, so I ended up building a model of the cooling ponds, and that was actually done. And we did the hot cell itself, but that was built for real, 30 tons of scaffolding, or someone, the set designer built.
Oh, okay.
And that all went in quarter of a mile down the mines. There was heck of a lot of setting up on Magnox, particularly those end sequences. And best BAFTA I never got. I'm duly modest here, because there was no BAFTA for television effects. There is
Uh,
now
yeah.
film, but not television. And I'm thinking, I could have been in line. No, I think we put in for about 12 BAFTAs and we got 10 of them. I think I possibly could have, so, oh well, I'll just satisfy myself with best BAFTA I never got. But anyway, water and bridges and things. But so yeah, overall, we ended up with a gigantic, it was built in a garden pond. It was about sort of 10 foot long. And we built the model in that. And we actually moved it actually to North Wales. So we actually shot it on site and then use front projection and back projected, as it were, outside windows, and use stock shots. That was a shot on 35mm film, that was, and that's already 4K. That is, without doing anything else. So yeah, we had sort of basically all aspects. We even had the slight aside, a sort of costume and makeup, the dead body floating in the lake, where myself and my colleague Sinclair played the frogman pulling the body. It was our body. We had our wetsuits with us anyway. We had to have them. So we said, we might, we've got the boat. We'll go out and do it and pull our body out of the water. So that's Sinclair actually on screen as well. So yes, we covered all things. I covered all things in Magnox more than I ever did in Doctor Who Black 7.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I mean, the sci-fi part of it was a small part of your job, really. But in terms of like, other TV dramas, so didn't you have to make a Batmobile for Rent-A-Ghost? Was that one of your craziest things you had to do?
I did one season. Again, it's a case of I did usually end up doing one season of everything. I mean, a bit more probably
Yeah.
on Who's, because of that. I mean, I did one season on Are You Being Served, one season on Enough Hot Mum and things like. Never did Dad's Army, unfortunately. Been like to have done that, but never did it. But yeah, we did Rent a Ghost. Rent a Ghost. I managed to. It was a superhero one, so I built a Batmobile out of a Triumph Herald. This is the Batmobile, the George Barris Batmobile from, as it were, from the original TV series. In fact, they weren't the original, but one everybody knows. The Adam West and Burt Ward series with the classic. In fact, by chance, I've got one here. Actually, I'm doing a book on things, and I happen to have got a pile of them down here. So the Batmobile everybody knows as the
Ah,
Batmobile.
yeah.
So that's the actual Barris Batmobile built out of the Ford prototype, Lincoln Futura prototype, and which he did in about 3 weeks. And everybody, no, that is the Batmobile. Forget all the movie version. That's the Batmobile. But we built one. We found a Triumph Herald. It's already got the fins. It's got. If you remember, go back to Google it. Then it's already got these sort of fins on the back. So we
Yeah.
built one out of that. It was right-hand drive, but it was great. It was the colours, and it was rustling like mad. We could only use it off road because it wasn't licensed. But so yes, I built a Batmobile for Rent a Ghost.
Well, going back to Doctor Who, so let's have a quick look. So the Curse of Peladon, that was your first Doctor Who work, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, it was. Although I didn't know what it was at the time. I'd just come down from Alexandra Palace AP to the main department. Jack had asked me to transfer from Open University. He put other people back there to help Jerry out. And I came down to the main department. And the first job I did was with Ian Scoons, filming in what we called the Puppet Theatre, which was the model stage at Television Centre. It was sandwiched between, at that point, between TC's 4 and 5,
Hmm.
which no longer exist as studios. Only 1, 2, and 3 are being rebuilt as studios at Television Centre. They are proper working studios, but 4 and 5 no longer exist. But in between the two was this wedge-shaped area, which, frankly, unless you knew it was there, you wouldn't know it was there.
Hmm.
Which was the puppet theatre where they film things like Muffin the Mule and things. So hence the puppet theatre. But we ended up calling it the model stage. And on there, and I was sent to help Ian out, and he had a model TARDIS, and he wanted the light to flash. And Ian was an excellent designer. He would design things meticulously. He'd do storyboards in colour. He'd do production artwork to film standards. He'd do storyboards in colour. I mean, you're lucky for me. You've got a pencil scribble. No, this will be a full colour. This is what I want to shoot. And he got this TARDIS that was going to fall off a cliff, but the light was on it. Now he'd been filming on 16mm film at 3 times normal speed, that's 75 frames a second. And of course, the light, when you slow it down to 25 frames a second, the normal speed, normal television speed, I won't go into the distance between 24 and 25, but that's all changed with digital now. But then it had to be 25 frames. Because once you slow it down, the light had to be flashing fast so that it would slow down by a factor of 3 to the normal time of
Uh,
flight. Now,
yeah.
as I said, Ian was absolute wonderful design, excellent designer, far better than I was, or even am. But he was used to electronics, which he admitted. Technology and electronics passed him by. Now, that I was good at.
Mm.
So I made the TARDIS light flash fast. So when it tumbled off, and it was literally just physically tumbled, no wires, it just physically tumbled, filmed 75 frames. The light was flashing, so when you slowed it down, it would go normal TARDIS
Right.
speed. So that was and I didn't know, I knew it was Doctor Who. Hey, was either that on Dixon or Doc Green, and he wasn't Dixon or Doc Green. Not many police boxes fell off cliffs in Dixon or Doc Green. So therefore, QED had to be Doctor Who. But I never found out until probably years afterwards that actually fact it was Kurt Spellingham. So that's my very first one. And given I've worked through, and if you certainly if you include DVDs and extras, through to very recently on Doctor Who, I'm one of the longest serving, not constantly, but from my very earliest. I think Katie Manning's the only one, and originally some of the cast from the very first Who, William Russell, wasn't it? He unfortunately he died recently, but he was in a very, very recent Who. I think it was the last shooty one, right before. Yeah. Anyway, one maybe the last Tennant, one of the redone Tennant ones. If in doubt, bring a doctor back. But certainly he's probably the longest ever, and that can never be beaten. But I'm sort of one of the, in the top 10 anyway, of the longest serving on Who's. But as I will reiterate, not constantly, long gaps between them.
Faces of Evil, that was your first Doctor Who as a designer,
As a
wasn't it?
designer, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a few things. So invisible footprints and a clock being crushed as well. So how did you do those?
Well, they're the easy ones.
Yeah.
The clock. The clock was easy. I mean, all the clock was, it was an actual alarm. If I remember, it wasn't an alarm. The actual details, I can't remember exactly what was in. It was an alarm clock with a double bell, if I remember correctly. On
Yeah.
it, you just make a vac form of the clock. Put in a vac.
Right.
I mean, basically, you put it on a vac form. We had several vac form machines in the department. You use a small one for that. Get a real clock. And then you vac form the parts of it, the bells. Well, you don't really need the bells and the two bells and the actual body. And then you from the bottom you put a length of nylon through the top to the top. Wherever you're going to film it, you need to know there's space underneath it. And basically, I think I'll probably put a stage weight. Stage weight is 28 pounds. They're imperial weight. Do the conversion to kilo if you want to, divide by 2.2 if I remember correctly, and put it on a bomb release. Bomb release, literally, they are what they're the sort of thing that drop bombs out of bombers, out of aircraft, and you fire them electrically and literally obviously make sure the camera's running, and let the bomb release go. The stage weight goes because they're this size, they're heavy. Boom! It goes pull down because the clock's going to completely flatten.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to do it again, you need another clock because you're not going to recover that flatten. The same thing with the footprints. The footprints were done exactly the same way. Again, you need space underneath, but you cut the space out and you have an insert that comes up, and then basically, if they're just like individual ones, you can be underneath it and put your assistant underneath and go, pull this one, then pull that one, and do it that way. Or again,
Yeah.
you could put them on bomb release. I'm pretty sure with footprints, we just did them individually. Boom, one, boom, boom, boom.
Right.
Yes, the footprint appears.
Cool. Planet of the Spiders. Sorry to go through the list. So tell us about the work you did on Planet of the Spiders.
Well, probably because you're going back earlier. Then I was still only an assistant then. In fact,
Yeah.
Bernard was the designer. Planet of the Spiders had a lot of, well, including the title, isn't it? The spiders in it, including the Queen, the Great One, which was built it's about 3 foot. Actually, it was big. I mean, there are spiders that are about this size. If you're an arachnophobe, I'm not. I love spiders; they're great.
Yeah.
You're going to be really terrified of the things. So the Great One the Queen wasn't actually that much bigger than a real Earth spider, and it was all mechanically operated underneath. In fact, one of the shots, Ian Scoons was the senior assistant, and I was one of the junior assistants, as it were. We didn't use the terminology, but that's what it was for Bernard. And he's actually dressed up as one of the people carrying the device that held the Queen spider, so he could be underneath operating it. And then he could sort of, if you did a long shot, he could quickly stand up an actor as if he's carrying the sedan chair, palanquin type of thing. So, and he was in the costume. A few of us do that every now and again. I mean, just I'll come back to it, but going forward to Warrior's Gate, the axe thumping into the table is me thumping it, because it's not a real axe, but it's actually a cast metal axe, so it's heavy and it's
Yeah.
sharp. And I thought it's just as easy, so I just put on the arms and the gloves and things, and
Mm.
so then came in and boom, did it. So you've just got the bits of me with the hands as the actor, and the axe working. So we often will do that. Again, we're back to health and safety bit. Do the risk assessment. Easier if we do it. I wouldn't say with the spider, it wasn't a case of health and safety. There was no real danger, just practicalities, because you're
Yeah.
shooting it sort of live. Obviously you're recording it, but you're on multi cameras. It's not like shooting nowadays. When we shoot one camera, you may have a couple of standbys, but everything's single camera. So you've got everything on that shot.
Mm.
It takes 3 times as long to film and 3 times as long to edit, but you've actually got it all as a movie would do. But then you were on 5 cameras, as the Spider one would have been. So just the practicalities of getting Ian in and out of shot. The Axe one was more health and safety. It's a case of,
Yeah.
I'm the effects designer. I do hopefully know what I'm doing. If I damage myself, it's my own silly fault. I didn't. But this is quite dangerous. This thing, you don't want to get hit by it. So that's why I actually did it. But going back to spiders, I was an assistant at the time, and we had a lot of spiders made as like dummy spiders. They were rubber mold with legs and things, and we put them in a somewhere, and we put nylons on them, and so they could twitch. So they would be
Yeah.
all of a sudden. And this literally was a last minute thing. We were still at Television Centre at the time, so it means the studio was in there, but our workshops were also there. And it was decided they wanted a spider that would run across the floor by itself
Right.
to Sarah Jane, I think it would have been at that time, to Liz, and which because we hadn't got. So Bernard says to me, and it's my lunchtime. Forget lunch, lunch on the run. Go up to the workshop and make us a mechanical one. Okay, so I literally did in a very very short period of time. Make what we called Boris. And if you know your Who tracks, it's the John Entwistle song. Strictly speaking, because the spiders would have been female, but hey, what the heck. So we used the body that was already done and the legs, and we used Meccano a lot. Nowadays it's going to be Lego, but then it was Meccano, and I got Meccano motor and Meccano gears, and made it all up on a piece of plywood as a prototype, thinking I'll build a proper one. No, never wasn't time. We used the prototype, a bit of plywood, loads of bent metal, loads of. It was pre-super glue. It was basically 2-part araldite. Mix it up, it will go hard. It was quick setting, like 5 minutes. Whereas super glue is almost instantaneous. So it was, put it all together with that bit of work, bit of soldering to get for the metal things. Got it wasn't pre-radio control, but it was certainly pre-small. Nowadays, you go down to heaven forbid, you go down to Sainsbury's or Tesco's and buy a radio controlled car for 10 quid, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take the body off, put the spider body on, you've got a radio control system, and probably at 2.4 gig, the new frequency, and Bluetooth frequencies. But no, then it wasn't. So I literally had to put a switch at the back. So basically, it was switch it on, ran across the floor, cameras running, and before it crashed into the scenery, which it did do a few times, I'd literally slide. I don't think I could do it these days. Slide across the floor and flick the switch just so it didn't completely tangle the legs up, so we could then bring it back and retake it. But so yes, that was my main contribution to Planet of the Spiders.
Blake Seven. So how did you get involved with that?
Again, it came through almost by chance in
Yeah.
that Ian had already been season one. We didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
and season one came along, and Ian, as a scene, I know he was a designer at that point. I mean, we didn't have seen it, but he was, long term, and because he'd worked on science fiction, because he worked for Anderson, and on the genre, because he worked with Hammer and horror films.
Yeah.
So he got put on as as the designer. I was doing something else, and I'd say halfway, wasn't it? Probably no more than about a quarter way through. Ian had gone into the office and said, I need another. We need another designer on this. There's too much work.
Yeah.
We didn't split jobs at that point, but there was a slight precedent because slightly before that, the year before, came The Invisible Enemy, Who, which Ian was also the main designer on, and also said there's too much work for one designer, and that's where Tony Harding came in. And I think he was only assistant at the time, so he got made up as an acting designer. And so he got the job of designing K9. That's another story, but because Invisible Enemy was a heavy effects show, heavier
Mm.
than normal for a Who. And they're interesting. There was no location. Normally there would be studios, location, and maybe a bit of model filming. There was no um, location filming, so Ian got all the location money, which meant he could actually film on 35mm, which was very unusual.
Mm.
Titles possibly because they're reshown a lot of the time, but for general stuff, no. He got it would be 16, but he got 35mm, and he went off to Bray, where he liked to film because that was where a lot of Hammer was shot. He liked to
Yeah.
film there. He went off there to film all the model stuff. He just wanted to film the model stuff. Come on in, admit it. He did. He didn't want to do the studio. He wanted the model stuff. Fine, fine. But he dragged me in. I was a designer by then, and he dragged me in and said, can you help out? I need some models, some shuttle models built. Shuttles in the general sense of the word, not the NASA shuttles in that
Yeah.
sense. I said, "But fine, okay, I'll do that." And so I built the shuttle models, and I went down. I did some of the model filming with him, and not a lot. I was doing other things, but like most people in the department were working on it. It was going to, well, here, do this. Can you do this sort of thing?
Mm.
So the precedent for splitting it was already done. So whereas one designer would do one bit of effects, and another designer would do another bit of effects. So in this case, of Ian doing the model, Tony doing, frankly, everything else, the studios, the special effects props, which included K9. So when it came to Blake, the precedent had slightly been set, only once, but it had been set. And I got called in, possibly Ian said, "Oh, because we work well together. We have
Mm.
similar had similar hair. I've still got mine." And so I got called in and said, "Can you take?" I'd got real no idea about it because I was doing other things, and I got a feeling also when it was originally written down, it was Blake 77. It was Blake and 77. I think somebody just written the 7 down twice, but it was always originally known as Blake 77, for some reason or other, until we rubbed out the other 7. But I got dragged onto it, and in fact, I did more or less what Tony did for that Who, in that
Mm.
I took over all the studios, but with stuff Ian had already designed. Which is it's one thing doing a job when you've designed it and the assistants who designed it, and you can say to them, "Yep, you're in the studio. If it goes wrong, you know how to repair it." But I was taking over stuff blind, basically. A
Yeah.
lot of the stuff, God, I had to really go down and work out how's this been organised. I said I was, technically minded, hopefully still am, more than Ian was, because obviously Ian got other people, other assistants to do it. So the first season, I'm busking my way through it more or less.
Mm.
When it came to the second season, Ian was off doing other things. Again, back to business of, oh, who's best for it? Well, Ian's done it before. No, we'll get somebody else to do it. But I'd done half of it. So I had the continuity.
Yeah.
So I came onto it. And my colleague, Peter Pilgrim, and in fact, also, again, we made an assistant, Angela Zell, at the time, up to acting designer. I said to her, look, I don't mind doing the model filming. We will literally split this exactly the same way as Ian did with Invisible Enemy. I don't mind doing all the model filming because it means I can just concentrate on doing that and I haven't got to think, oh, so and so's in the studio. Haven't got that time. But you go off and do that and do all the locations. I mean, the locations are going to be pretty limited to the BBC Forest, the BBC Sand Dune, or the BBC Quarry,
Mm.
which basically they were. Which is not that exciting. Here we're going to the south of France. We're going to the Canary Islands. Oh yeah, I'll do. No, this would have been the BBC Forest. BBC Forest is the one next door to Pinewood Studios, Black Park.
Right. Okay.
It's always BBC Forest. And in fact, I did actually film a couple of things for Blake there. But otherwise, for season 2, I did all the model work. And so in
Right.
that way, it was actually, which was quite nice, and very, very recently, because BBC Studios the commercial wing of the BBC, what used to be Enterprises and then Worldwide is now BBC Studios, decided that it wanted to reissue Blake as Blu-rays. At which point you paused because it was shot standard definition, 65 lines, which is not Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Blu-ray was not HD. HD has really never been defined, but it's anything, frankly, anything above 700, but it's taken generally to be 1080. They wanted, so they updated. There's hardware, there's software now, computer software that will, I would say, genuinely, and it's not AI. Most of what
Mm.
people say is AI isn't AI. It's a sophisticated computer program that will do it, which will reproduce what should have been there for an HD picture from a standard definition picture, and
All
that's what's been used for it. But because it also includes, and what they decided in their ultimate wisdom, to reshoot all the model stuff that I'd done. Some of which I'd done for some of which I'd done for season one, but most of it for season two. But that was shot on film.
Yeah.
Now, film is already HD. Film is 2K. 16 minutes 2K. As I said before, 35 minutes 4K already. So hang on, we're already there. But because what I couldn't do back in the late 70s was the sophistication you can now do digitally with CGI.
Mm.
I've basically get a liberator on the screen, left to right, right to left, stationary, over. I introduced front axial projection for it so I could change backgrounds. I got my friend David Hardy, the space artist, because he knows the astronomy of it. I said, I want a planet that looks a bit like Earth, it isn't Earth, and the sun's coming from that side, whatever. So he'd paint me. So we put them in the front projection machine, project them, put the Liberator in front. Because setting up the Liberator to travel, particularly the big one, you couldn't fly it. Well, you could do, but you'd be on horses about the size of a QE that need to the QE to it in its by its key. So we put it on a pole on a trolley with big rubber wheels and sweep the floor and make sure it's running smoothly on the floor. And then once you got it set up and lit so you didn't quite see the pole, nowadays you just paint the thing out, and that'd be difficult to do then. But
Yeah.
then just change the background. So if you actually the shot, you'll find the Liberator moving is exactly the same. The background's changed, the planets change. So I got through the shots that way. I had to do about 6 shots a day. So
Wow.
completed. And one day I remember I didn't do any, nothing came out. So the next day it was 12 shots in that day. We did it but they weren't sophisticated. They weren't Star Wars, they weren't loads of planets, loads of comets flying, whatever. CGI, you can do it. So what they decided to reshoot where we had the original models, and in many cases we have still got the original models. We reshoot the original models digitally, and then a CGI guy, Chris Thompson in Belfast, he works out of Belfast, would take those shots and then add in. We'd either put them against black, which you can key against, or green, green screen, blue screen, whatever. We usually use green actually, and then he put the other planets in, other stars or whatever. And of course they could be moving because he could
Mm.
get them to move computer-wise. Which I would have great difficulty. I mean, I could none of the shots he's recreated I couldn't have done in the late 70s, but one shot would have taken me the entire effects budget and the entire effects time. ILM could do it. I can't do it. I didn't have the time or the money to do it. We had the techniques, but didn't have the time or the money. But nowadays you can do it, and of course it's then automatically. It was originally high definition, because it now still is high definition. And where film of the exterior still exists, and some does, that was reshot and rescanned.
Mm.
So that also was put in as HD. So that also came. In fact, actually had to be degraded slightly because it's 2K, come down to 1080. But in that way, you've got that as an HD shot as well. We've had as we speak. It's had season 1 and season 2 being presented to the fans at the BFI, and it's all gone down rapturously. And yes, we're doing 3 and 4.
Excellent. On the original series, you've got someone to do a matte painting, the back projection of, let's say, a planet or whatever, and then you've got the spaceships in front which have got lighting on them. Did you have to sort of coordinate with the artist so that the light source was always coming from the same direction? Did you, obviously that was part of the planning.
The easy answer is to say yes. Yes, it was part of the planning. I mean, it was. If it's a planet that was obviously lit from one side, from whatever light source, its sun, or
Yeah.
several suns. You have you've got to remember, in as far as the universe, or as far as we know, in fact, our sun, the single sun, G2 type star, is slightly unusual. Most systems are actually multi-systems, they're two or more. So
Yeah.
we're actually slightly odd, but let's assume we are just one. So yes, you have got the light coming from the one source. You also do, and this is always a problem when filming spaceships in space, particularly in deep space, is
Mm.
where is the light coming from?
Yeah.
Um, if you're around a planet or in a solar system and you've got a star or stars, yes, you've got an obvious light source. You always invariably have to add a bit of fill because look at Apollo pictures. Yes,
Mm.
they are genuine. They're not fake. Goodness sake, go on. But the way some people go through an Apollo 11, you think it'd be harder to fake it. They would actually go and do it. So the shadows there are extremely sharp. Um, but people say, oh, you can see there's fill light in there. Yes, because the moon's surface is extremely bright. What's called its albedo. Off from the sun, it shines, it bounces off the surface, the grey dust. It's very and bounces off the bits of the lunar module you can't see. Well, we had to do more of the same with the Liberator. So you had a little bit of fill light just to show the overall shape. So it just wasn't a stark, lit, very harshly lit one side than the other. And again,
Yeah.
if it's a planet, it's bouncing off the planet. It happens on Earth. Earth's got a very high albedo. They're called the clouds. They bounce
Mm.
like that's why you can see the old moon and the new moon's arms when you've got just a crescent moon. You see yes, that's Earth light bouncing from the sun, bouncing off the Earth, bouncing back to the moon. Yes, it makes the moon shine. So we had to be a bit creative with that, and particularly in the Liberator, particularly at the end when it of the season 2 when it's outside of our galaxy and
Yeah.
traveling to star one, which we assume is one that's between galaxies, between us and the Magellanic Clouds or Andromeda or whatever. But it's supposed to, I mean, and in fact, it is reckoned there are rogue stars between with possible planetary systems between galaxies, so they this could be for real as such. But hey, we're telling a story, and so there's always the worry about okay, we've got the shot of the Liberator in deep space. What's lighting it? Well, it's lit. Don't ask questions,
Yeah.
except it's lit, except there's artificial gravity, so they're not all bouncing around. The only one who actually got away with that was probably 2001, very cleverly. Otherwise, you say, all right, we do a couple of shots when they're floating, and after that, forget it. There's artificial gravity, or we're not taking any notice of it. We're telling a story after all. It's a drama, not a documentary.
Yeah.
It has to be a drama doc, but anyway, never mind. So yeah, so that can be a problem with the lighting as such, but normally we got around it.
Yeah. Was it quite difficult using the cameras back then? Because I read I'm just referring to my notes, sorry. So you had an interview in Starburst magazine,
Oh, that
and
goes back a bit.
yeah, so it was using the old Mitchell cameras, the multi-pass techniques for it. So you had some problems there, I believe. It was 16 millimeter versus 32 millimeter.
35. Actually, it's actually 36, but it's what's called 35.
Okay,
The frame size is 24 by 36,
right.
but the film was always referred to as 35. 35 mil, it's what cinema films are shot on. If not shot on IMAX, which is 65. Well, 65 minutes, the biggest film format. That's enormous. 65 minutes across it. If
Yeah,
you shoot Vista Vision is sideways. You've got each frame size is like that. I mean, it's amazing. But 35 minutes is perfectly adequate. I said it's already 4K anyway, and we tend to use it if we needed it for front projection, because once it's projected, that picture is then a second generation. So if you're then filming it on 16 mil, the Liberator, whatever in front, is first generation, and the picture in the back is second generation. But because it's 35 mil, 4 times the size, you're matching the generations. That's why we use it, and it was used a lot on titles because obviously you're seeing them every week, and any
yeah,
flaws you're going to see. I mean, there was weave on the film going, even though the gates were pretty accurate, you were still a mechanical pulling the film down. Now, you've got sort of like 4 sprocket holes on 35mm. You've only got one on 16mm. So do the math. The
Yeah.
profile could be weaving slightly. You could, because nowadays digitally you can correct it all. Although there's a danger of overcorrecting it because then it becomes too. There is a danger of things becoming too digital anyway.
Hmm.
Film is film. It's take you into a story. Digital can be too live. Is this reporter outside number 10 an actual reporter outside number 10, or is it a story about a reporter about it? Because it looks exactly the same. With
Yeah.
film, all right, originally it was film in the old days. When I first worked it was still film. It wasn't digital. It
Yeah.
wasn't video, let's put it that way. It was still film. So, but nowadays, no. I mean, everything's going to be lightweight cameras. In fact, or probably it's probably your phone it's been shot on. And but there the 35mm would give you a much better picture.
Yeah.
The cameras were larger. I mean, the Mitchell, we use an R35 Mitchell, which is the classic Mickey Mouse. That's it, and there's the camera. Um, uh, they were big, but they were certainly smaller than the TV cameras at the time.
Hmm.
Certainly smaller and lighter. They could be up on the shoulder, sort of thing. If you're
Yeah.
very butch cameraman. I say cameraman because most of them weren't there, not cameraman. DP, that's director of photography, so that way. But they could carry them around. I mean, 16mm, we used to use Arriflexes, BLs most of the time. Most of the time, I think it was BLs. But the Mitchells were big, but they weren't that big, and they certainly weren't that cumbersome.
Yeah. Hmm. What always comes over in all the interviews is your, absolute love for the subject. I mean, and you've written so many books about the subject as well, haven't you?
Well, well, I happen to have. I do actually happen to. I mean, the main book myself, my friend and colleague Mike Tucker wrote is that one.
Hmm.
He wanted. In fact, he came up with an excellent title, "Cause and Effect." I thought it was great. The
So,
publisher didn't like it. You've
yeah.
got to be J.K. Rowling or Stephen King to have your publisher. So they came out, BBC VFX. All right, it does what it says on the tin. But with cause and effect, I think is great. Have to explain it slightly. But so I've done that, and I've done a number of books on models in general. That's more from the amateur modeling side. I mean, the two sides do sort of cross over.
Hmm.
There are differences. I had to explain to somebody once about building a model in an amateur sense. Let's say building a diorama
Hmm.
for an amateur to be displayed at your local model show, whatever, is somewhat different than building it for filming.
Yeah.
For a start, a model here, some on the cover of mine, some aren't, are built solid in that they're built to, pick them up. You don't want the sort of, take it outside to put it in the car. You don't want the wind blowing all the dust away. Well, so they're built sort of solid, hard. Whereas for model filming, they're built soft. They're built, literally put a bit more dust in there, whatever, because they're going to reset it for do another shot. And then at the end, you're going to clear it up anyways. It's not going to stay there. So
Yeah.
there are differences. And for filming, again, I will use spaceships as an example because that's what's usually quoted. But you've got to hold the thing somehow or other. You've got to build in frameworks inside the model to actually hold the thing. Well, if you're doing a model that's just going to sit on a diorama base, even an aircraft flying, you just need one point. You fixed it there, and
Yeah.
that's it. Otherwise, they're sitting on a surface or a ship is on the sea. For filming, no, you need to be able to. Most of the models are built. We start off with a cruciform. It's usually a steel 1 inch steel tubing,
Hmm.
which we build as a cruciform, literally uh, the three axes XYZ dimensions, and then the model is built around it, and then
Hmm.
each side you then build a bit in that you can remove. So if you're from the front, you take the back bit out and put the pole in that way, or if you're underside, you take the top bit out and put the pole in that way to
Hmm.
secure it and do it that way. I mean, you can hang them on wires as well, but I mean, if you're doing the pole bit, but because an amateur model maker is never going to do that.
Yeah.
We have filmed an amateur model. I'm going back to Blake because that shows the before and after, and because we haven't got the a Liberator in its original form because we've still got it, but it's damaged and distressed in the way it was at the end of season 3 when it blew up.
Yeah.
It itself didn't blow up. You again, there's a difference between you build a model. If you're building a model to blow up, you don't use your hero model because it's not. It's got, if it's got the one with the armature in it, you're going to end up with bits of metal flying all over the place, which you don't really want. It doesn't
Yeah.
look right. There we borrowed an excellently built amateur model maker. He's an amateur model maker, extremely good. We borrowed his model of the Liberator, but it's got none of the pot. It's got no holes in
Bad
it.
points.
Holes, so we had to fly it. Admittedly, these days we can get rid of the wires a lot easier, so we weren't too worried. We can overdo the wires, and we know very well they can be taken out. But actually, going to the blowing something out, going to my favourite Doctor Who, which is Warrior's Gate.
Hmm.
There, the privateer is blown up at the end. Now, the privateer model, there were two models. There was the hero model, which did have all the holes built into it with bits you could take out. So I mean, it didn't do much. It landed, and that's about it. But it needs to
Yeah.
land. It had the holes built into it, which you could then fill in with a piece of actual modeling bit, so it didn't you couldn't see the hole. But at the end, it blows up,
Hmm.
which is one of the biggest model explosions I did. It was done in the workshop actually, and using two cameras, a 35mm and a 16mm. 16mm low cam, which is an industrial camera that runs at 500 frames a second. It's the fastest intermittent action you can go. Otherwise, you shred the film. And you need a very good clapper loader to load it, because if they misjudge it, it will completely shred the film. So many times you open the film, the film's just completely
Yeah.
ripped. It's got to be correctly loaded. And I had an R35 that would do 125 frames. It's the fastest that 35 that will go. And we shot it twice. We had enough to do it twice. And so we had 4 bits of film, and really the editor went to town, used far more than ever thought they would actually use, which is great from my point of view. It really shows it. But there we blew up a wireframe model.
Hmm.
So you have the structure of the privateer model with its odd fins and things. And then we put plastic card outside it, filled the inside just bits of bits of kits, bits of pieces, and a small explosive. It didn't need very much to blow up a model only that size. Little bit of petrol, just I mean, literally a teaspoonful. That's all you need. Magnesium, we call it the star. When you see the Star Wars effect, you see the streaks. That's magnesium metal, little tiny granules. You put it
Oh,
on
okay.
there with the very small explosive, and then 3, 2, 1. Put your tin hats on, lads and lasses, and press the button. Oh, cameras are running at that point.
Hmm.
Turn over, speed, press the button. You've got no idea when I did it, because it's film. When we did it, we got no idea what we got. Once we saw the rushes the following day, really we didn't know on Warriors Gate, the gateway all blow. It's all plaster, very weak mix of plaster. You blew it up that way, and there's stuff that grief. You just couldn't see it by eye, but you saw it there, and in fact, well, I think one of the best, well, certainly the best model shot I ever did. And in fact, I've actually got the whole film, the unedited film, transferred to DVD, so I can actually play it as a DVD. Here's the complete film. It lasts ages because it's running at 20 times normal speed. 1 second is 20 seconds. It
Hmm.
wasn't a minute. It didn't actually last that long, but it's 30 seconds. We'll multiply by 20, do the math. And So it's all actually there. You can see absolutely every single thing, and the editor did a wonderful job of cutting all the relevant bits together. Boom, there's a bit of the gateway going, and the window behind it, and you actually did bits of plaster just hanging in the air because they've blown either side of the things. I think we just couldn't see it. Interestingly enough, going back to reshooting Blake,
Hmm.
the one thing you get original are the explosions, because um, Chris said, I can't do the explosions. They can be done, but they always look digital. These are real explosions.
Yeah.
They're done by basically put the camera on the floor, put glass over the top of it to protect it, put a thing in the roof, and again on a low cam, speed, bang, and then you just get bits. And of course, the thing about putting it in the air and putting the camera on the floor, all the bits, because normally if you did it horizontally, all the bits would go down. It's called gravity. In
Yeah.
space, there is no gravity. There is, but let's say it's free fall conditions, the more correct term. But so they go equally out. Well, if you do from the top, all you're seeing is the bits coming towards you. You don't see there's nothing going away from you.
Yeah.
So that's the way all the shots are done. So in fact, when you look at the shots, the digitized shots on the Blake reshoots, they are actually the analog explosions, all
Ah,
carefully mixed in. It looks fine, but
yeah.
they are the original analog film shots. They're not digital at all.
Clever stuff. Yeah, I was wondering about that because I used to work in computer games, and of course, all the explosions you get on a computer, they just look wrong, don't they? They just look like,
Yeah,
yeah.
computer games I've never gone into. I played one once. I'm thinking I can waste one hell of a lot of time doing this, and I've never touched it since. But one is aware of what they can do. But there you are, you are being taken out of reality. I hope most of the time, and you already suspending disbelief. So if your explosion or anything like that looks a bit fake, I don't think there's any problem.
Yeah, inside a
Although
game,
some of the
yeah.
stuff I have seen, it's looking more and more realistic. But I
Yeah,
think there's always that element with computer games that takes you slightly out of reality, which if you're doing a drama like Blake or Who or whatever, isn't. That's supposed to be real, as such. So you have less of an opportunity to with the computer games. I think you've got more of a freedom.
yeah.
Maybe I should have to have another look at it.
And just quickly, why did you leave the Beam after it was just shy of 25 years, wasn't it?
I was given an offer I couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
We knew things were winding down.
Mm,
The heydays of the BBC, particularly, was probably the 70s and into the 80s. I said in the department, certainly we had 100 odd people. In fact, some were very odd, possibly me. People working there because you had to. That included office staff, which you needed, all the stores to make sure you got stuff you go and get. Can of paint need to be in the stores. Stock effects had to be maintained, and that smoke gun works, as well as the people in the department. And but that was the heyday.
yeah.
I blame Channel 4, not for being Channel 4, it's a great channel. But when Channel 4 started, which I think was 82, things started to change. A
Mm,
lot of people left the Beeb and went to Channel 4, Channel 4 offshoots or whatever. Um, things started winding down. The BBC itself realised it did everything. Everything itself. I'm not saying we didn't use outside people. We did freelancers outside, whatever. But I always quote the commissionaires were BBC staff. They had the commissionaires uniform, but they were BBC staff.
mm.
We were all staff. I always say, you go to a party. Occasionally, I do these days. Oh, it was BBC. What's your staff number? They can't give you a staff number. They weren't BBC. It's ingrained into you. 13988. It's my freelance number as well. It's great now. I can go back and use my staff number as my freelance number, and not my pension number, oddly. But I don't know why they hadn't done that. But anyway, but it was everything. The BBC could do everything inside,
Mm.
but they suddenly realised the world's changing, media's changing. In fact, it's called media, not broadcasting.
Yeah,
People were using more outside people. People were leaving the BBC and setting themselves up as freelancers. Departments were going.
yeah,
Um, all the design group eventually went, costume makeup, graphics moved to post production, set design went. Effects was the last one left, with that Mike Tucker left running a model unit out of the original, the last effects department premises, until that closed in 2005, I think it was. The department officially closed in 3, and Mike kept it going for about another 18 months. So it did just make over 50 years. The department itself made 49 years, so no gold watch, typical BBC. But I could see, and they were offering, frankly, good redundancy packages. Make no, 2-year salary, and in fact, you draw your pension at 50, which is what I did. And I thought I wanted projects I wanted to do. I wanted to do a film. I wanted to film. It's not a secret. A film Arthur Clarke, who I knew the Clarke family for 30 or so years. I wanted to film Arthur's Fall of Moondust, and with Mike and a few other of my colleagues, some ex most ex-Beeb, or still Beeb, or then became ex-Beeb.
Mm.
We set it all up. We worked it all out. We did a script. I did a script with Chris Boucher. Unfortunately, Chris has also died recently, and it never got green lit. It's quite feasible to do, still be done. I've have a in my room next door where I keep all these things. There's the whole ready to go. That it could be done. And, the script is
Mm.
Arthur liked the script. It needs tweaking, but it basically it just didn't happen. But I did spend a lot of time on that, and effort and production art. Again, my mate Dave Hardy, who did my stuff for Blake, he did some pre-production artwork for that.
Mm.
So we've got pre-production stuff for it. But there, and then keep on doing other things. We started doing exhibitions. I still do a lot of writing, hence the books. Exhibitions. I run my own shows at my local village hall. I moved up here in '88. My village hall literally is 200 yards, meters if you prefer, more or less the same. Across there, I'm a trustee there now, and we run our small space and other model shows there, which have become very, very popular. Hence wearing the t-shirt,
Ah.
hence using the mug. Are small shows. They are small space shows, but they're big small space. People say, "Oh, you can move out." I say, I don't want to. It wouldn't be small space. It is what it is. We're as big as we can possibly get. And we have people coming from abroad. I mean, all right, Americans will organize their vacation around it when it comes specific. It's an American guy I know lives in Berlin. He drives in for it specifically
Ah, cool.
through the tunnel, but he comes over it. So yeah, I mean, we are very well known now. In fact, next year, as we do this, which will be 26, we'll do Small Space 13, lucky for some. So things to think about. Apollo 13, possibly. That Attack on Precinct 13, that was a movie, wasn't it? Or something like that?
Yeah, it was.
Friday the 13th, there was another one. So we don't have to have a theme. That last year we didn't really have a theme. It's the wildest, most successful one yet. So there might be certain things we do, but we cover real space. I have my colleagues from the BIS, other fellows of the British Independence Society. They came along with real stuff, which is great. It shows hey, we can do stuff here.
Mm.
We're very big on building satellites in the UK. We're not so good on building rockets and having Euronauts. We've got Tim Peake, obviously, and other people coming along. But building satellites, but building unmanned, I should say unpersoned satellites, we are very, very good at. We have that. We obviously have science fiction there. It's Star Trek 60th next in 26. So
Also is.
hey, that's the theme we can use. We can probably get that in somewhere. And of course, we've got fantasy and horror as well. So, I mean, basically, if we think it fits, it fits. We're happy with it.
Yeah.
I said that, while I'm still able to walk around, I'll carry on doing them. I said I've only got 200 yards to go across to the hall, so far travel. And I do other shows as well. I did a Blake one up in Newcastle earlier in the year, which again was successful.
Mm.
People are still. It's amazing how many people are still fans of who you can understand who is continuous. Admittedly, has a long gap sometimes between it. Sylvester will maintain. I'm the longest serving Doctor Who. I said, no, you can't count the gap in between, Sylvester. That's when it was off the air. I know you were in that one and you were in the movie, the original movie one. But anyway, but no, and we've got Phil filling in with other of Russell's offshoots at the moment. That's probably be back hopefully in 27, maybe Christmas 26.
Mm.
But So yeah, we've still got popularity as far as that goes. But I'm amazed still that people who were never born when Blake went out, they're still mad about the thing. The audience at the BFI when we showed the first two seasons, I
Yeah.
guarantee you half them were not born when Blake first went out,
Yeah.
or even last went out. So they're younger than that, but they still have found it and enjoy it. But then there are old shows we all enjoy. A sort of
Mm.
films. Forbidden Planet, one of the best science fiction films ever made.
Mm.
It's actually Shakespeare's The Tempest rewrit. But, actually, I was just about born when that came out, but I certainly didn't see it then. So it doesn't mean you can't enjoy things that are older than you, as it were.
Yeah. Well, it's been an amazing chat, mate. Honestly, I'm really glad you got back to me and we could organise this. It's been absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much.
That's all right, Sean. It's good to reminisce again about things. I haven't done it for some time, but the elements always come up and get repeated again, possibly in a slightly different form. Don't quote me too much about this. But no, it's good to talk.
Thanks.